Hey everyone, and welcome back to the 1v1 series and our first match in the quarterfinals. For this round we're going to be changing up the scoring system with use of a few new features. First of all, prior to the fight happening, we're going to assess the killer's available weapons and changes from their available cosmetics and add-ons to work to their full potential against the killer they are facing. This section is called Loadout. We then move on to our next category, which is called Strategy, where we'll briefly cover how the killer will go about facing the other and how they plan to attack them based on what we know about them and their previous encounters. Next, we move on to a section where we look at previous statistics, give a breakdown of their overall scoring, which will then be equated into a percentage. Finally, we will apply the two multipliers to the final score. These multipliers are the history multiplier. This gives the killer a percentage boost for how significant their history is, and then we have the weakness multiplier, which gives the killer a percentage reduction for how significant their weaknesses are. This will result in a final percentage, or what I'm calling an efficiency rating. Little confusing, but let's get into it and hopefully it'll make sense. So first off, we have Loadout. Let's begin with Trapper's Loadout. From previous rounds, we established that Trapper has a relatively good loadout with two effective weapons and a thick protective skin that can defend against sharp weapons especially. Let's look at the add-ons he's going to be bringing for this fight. Iridescent Stone is going to be Trapper's first pick for an add-on. In the heat of the fight, he isn't going to be able to reset traps, therefore this add-on's ability to do it by itself is going to be very important against the relentless forward push of Billy. Tar Bottle is going to be Trapper's second pick, and one that I'm going with as having traps that are far darker is going to help him considerably, especially against the already slightly less aware Hillbilly, who's going to get easily lost in a rage. These traps are going to make it a bit more likely that Billy will misstep and get trapped. Okay, now on to what Trapper's bringing for his clothing and primary weapon. Trapper's bringing along a visor for the hopes that he can deflect as much damage as possible if he's either struck to the head or the chainsaw comes down onto it. This does restrict his movement a bit more than usual, but it's going to be pretty effective for blocking any blows. The only weakness is that the back of his head is still pretty exposed with this visor, and vision is a little more restricted. Next, he'll be wearing the combustion suit. As his skin is already pretty tough and can get through some weapon blows, we're going with Trapper's combustion suit, which allows some free movement but also some parts of armoring which have these little spikes on and can help him to last out if he's left weaponless. Overall, he has armor on the parts of the body where he needs it, with his arms being freed up for movement. Next, he's taking the Drill Kill. This weapon is a choice I've made, as it, out of all of the weapons, will definitely be able to puncture Billy's skin and do some serious damage, with Trapper's force behind it. It's also going to be very sturdy and likely, unlike some of the others, it will be capable of clashing with a chainsaw and coming out of it complete. Downsides are that it's a bit heavier, but as Trapper just has the one weapon, it's not too much of an issue. Okay, now Billy's loadout. From previous rounds, we established that Billy has a good loadout with two very effective weapons and a thick protective skin that can defend against some damage, not as much as Trapper's though. However, Billy does have an incredible degree of speed. Spiked boots are going to be Billy's first add-on pick. This add-on lets him both steer with his chainsaw easier and also have a shorter stun if he collides with an object while sprinting. This is basically just going to reduce the potential for him to be exposed to any easy blows from Trapper and potentially give him the chance to dodge traps when he sees them, although the speed is going to make this hard. Apex Muffler is his next pick, this one allowing his chainsaw to remain silent when out of the Trapper's terror radius. This is going to be helpful to level the playing field against Trapper, who's generally pretty stealthy. If Hillbilly can get close to Trapper without being heard, his chainsaw will do a ton of damage. This will help him to do that. Okay, now on to what Billy's bringing for his clothing and primary weapon. First off, we have Hot Bod. He's bringing the very light clothing and protecting of the Hot Bod cosmetic. This is a slightly odd choice, you could say, but none of Billy's cosmetics offer very much protection. Pretty much everything he has is made of cloth. His best bet is to have light and free moving clothing that is going to allow him to use his weapons to their full potential. With this, he has no visual obstruction and has a high amount of overall agility to compensate for his slower and heavier weapons. Next, we have Man of the Wild. These are trousers that cover all of his legs for some very minimal protection, but overall it's going to be best as they again are going to allow him to move freely, whilst also giving a small buffer against bear traps. These are preferable over his jeans as they're going to restrict his movement more. To make up for his pretty light clothing options, we're going with the shock hammer for his primary. This is a weapon which is more on the blunt and stunning side of things. The reason for this is that we know that Trapper isn't going to be too affected by sharp weapons, as he has hooks going through him. Having a blunt stun-based weapon is going to be a better pick for trying to take Trapper down. For the sharp side of things, he's got his chainsaw. Okay, now on to strategy. Trapper's strategy from looking at his past is to set up prior to even considering an attack. This is evident both in his lore but also how he's generally played in game. As Trapper isn't going to be able to set multiple traps, he's going to have to opt for setting up a few good ones and hope the automatic resets from iridescent stone help him out. Overall though, he wants to set traps and then lure Hillbilly into his trapped area using his cleaver if necessary. He's going to be assuming Billy will run in without checking around too much, as that's his biggest advantage, so he'll have to set up a few traps quite quickly. Billy's strategy against Trapper is going to be to get the jump on him early, with use of his apex muffler and incredible speed. If Hillbilly can get a chainsaw strike early on, he's going to be in a pretty good spot for the rest of the fight, as long as he hits in a critical area. If he's quick enough and gets the first blow, he may be able to stand off against Trapper. With faster movement and multiple weapons, he could end it quickly. The longer Billy waits, the more time Trapper gets to set up, so he has to be quick. Rush in and swing is generally his strategy in the lore though. Okay, now on to statistics. For Trapper, we figured out that he has a good set of tools and overall equipment, with high proficiency in his power and a strategic approach to situations and opponents, some of which have been bears. He's let down however in that his speed is quite slow, he's lumbering, lacks agility, but it's made up for in his resistance capability and overall strength, making him overall quite efficient. His efficiency rating comes out as 66.67%. Based on his history though, we learned of the animals he's taken down, as well as the many things he did in service of his father, which most definitely include acts of violence. He's described to have dominated his father's workers, so with his history multiplier, this brings his rating up to 72%. The great thing about Trapper is that he really doesn't have many weaknesses outright, mainly due to his thick skin and his ability to repeatedly take damage and remain unstoppable. He gets a small weakness multiplier due to his slower speed and the possibility of exposure if he can't set up in time. This brings his final efficiency down to 70.56%. For Billy, we figured out that he has a strong set of tools and overall equipment, with a strange proficiency in his power due to him relying on a relentless approach to his opponents. He's let down however in that he is quite exposed. Within the lore we see him get injured by bullets, which would suggest his skin is certainly not as tough as Trapper's. He is super quick though, he's not lumbering like Trapper. He has some small stun effects, but overall has great agility, good strength, good endurance, generally making him efficient. His efficiency rating comes out as 73.33%. Within his lore, we learn of the many human opponents that Billy takes on and survives and overcomes with his tremendous strength and speed. Where Trapper's damage will remain the same, Billy's will surely be lower, as he's only really fought regular people, some with training, so a slight reduction to his multiplier, which brings his rating up to 78.46%. As mentioned, Billy's weaknesses are far more substantial than Trapper's, at least in the context of this fight. His ability to possibly sustain more damage and quite a lot at Trapper's hand, and having to rely on quick movement, and his ability to strike first, I'm assigning a fairly high weakness multiplier. This brings his final efficiency down to 73.29%. So it's close, but Billy does come out just ahead still, and so he's the winner and will be moving on to the next round. And now it is time for the description of the fight. Trapper found himself in the confusing Coldwind farm fields of corn. He knew what was coming though. He set up a trap quickly, attempting to locate another, looking around to see if anything was coming. He leant down to reach for a trap, when out of nowhere the noise of a chainsaw punctured the air. Behind him, he swung his cleaver back and was met with the full force of Billy's sprint. The chainsaw and cleaver clashed, the sheer weight of the cleaver allowing Trapper to live another day to what otherwise would have ended him then and there. Trapper trudged forward. He could feel some pain in his shoulder where the chainsaw had sliced. He swung his cleaver at Billy, who returned the attack with a block from his hammer. The two locked weapons and glared eye to eye. Trapper forced him back, swinging violently. Billy retreated back as he did, dodging the swings with his lighter footing. Then he screamed. a bear trap's claws slowly clamping onto his leg. Billy instinctively reached for his chainsaw, revving it up before Trapper could swing. Still in the trap, he slashed Trapper across his chest, making him fall back. Billy took the opening, sawing through the metal bear trap and releasing it. He revved again, slowed by the jaws that had clamped him, and ran at Trapper, missing him narrowly but managing to cleave a chunk off his shoulder. Trapper was tiring, but he noticed an inactive trap suddenly activate. He groaned and slammed a backhand across Billy's face. Trapper full force piled into him. He pushed Billy over, right into the claws of the bear trap. The trap snapped down, smashing into Billy's sides, but leaving him largely uninjured. Billy got up, swinging his hammer. It shattered off of the Trapper's visor, stunning him but leaving him uninjured behind. Trapper swung a heavy fist, missing Billy entirely, instead smashing some corn to bits. Billy had his chainsaw back now, and began to rev it. Trapper grabbed onto the chainsaw just as it started up. The two of them fought over it, their hands clenching on the handle, the roaring blade whirring between the both of them, its sharp teeth zooming around the chain. Trapper began to overpower Billy, the chainsaw slowly ripping at his flesh when suddenly Billy let go. He couldn't win a match of strength. He dodged the chainsaw blade, making Trapper crash to the ground as the momentum drove him forward. Billy took his opportunity, swinging his hammer down at the Trapper's head, exposed from behind. It flew down, smashing into it. The sheer force made Trapper crumple on the floor. Billy screamed in agony and victory as he stood over the fallen Trapper. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and do let me know what you think of the new scoring system. I like it. It's a bit different and means we're not just covering the same ground over and over. Again, let me know what you think. Thanks, and goodbye. An additional thank you to LHPL3 as well as my other members for supporting the channel.